This is 1988 Topps, where every card has a story to tell. Your hosts are David McKellis and Matt Kuzma. Let's play ball. Welcome back to 1988 Topps. David, what's our card this week?
Our card this week is number 680, Charlie Hough of the Texas Rangers. Matt, looking at this Charlie Hough card,
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right here.
I see what looks like a tired. How old does Charlie look in 1987 here? He's got the
Charlie,
big T Texas Rangers hat.
man, that is the hats back then. They were very tall,
It's a
very
very
tall,
tall hat.
very tall hat and a tall tee. Charlie Hough here kind of looks like the character in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the Odo, who was a shapeshifter, whose face was
does
very
he?
smooth because he could dissolve into a bucket.
Yes, I do remember Odo.
He has a very melty kind of face that looks like it's been weathered for many years.
Matt, it might surprise you to know that in this picture, Charlie Hough is the same age that I currently am. Charlie Hough is 39 in this picture, but that's a
That is, boy, those eyes have seen a lot in that picture.
Charlie Hough was born in 1948, and in this card, this picture would have been taken in 1987, and he looks every day of that 39. And I
Can I
think
go
part
out
of
on
that
a?
is
I want to go out on a limb here and guess that maybe Charlie was a smoker.
Charlie Hough was definitely a smoker, and there
Yeah.
it's amazing to read some of these old interviews where he's sitting in the locker room after a game with the Marlins late in his career, where he's 44, 45 years old, and the reporter makes clear that he's sitting in the locker room smoking a cigarette. And Charlie would smoke between innings. He would smoke in the dugout. And
Yeah.
when that was banned, he would then go back to the clubhouse and smoke
Oh man.
between innings. So
Wow.
yeah,
They don't make him like that anymore.
no, that's doesn't seem like a professional athlete. But Charlie Hough was a knuckleballer, so there is a little bit of a different standard for knuckleballers. They could pitch well into their 40s. And that's kind of why I like to talk about Charlie Hough, because I remember him coming to the White Sox as a 43-year-old. And there's some really good quotes from Charlie talking about he really knew his role, that he was just there to eat up innings because he could throw knuckleballs all day long. Doesn't take not a lot of stress on your arm. You're throwing a 65, 70 mile an hour pitch. So he even said, if one of these young kids is tired, I can just go out there and throw 7 innings and he can come back the next day. And Charlie knew what his role was in that White Sox team.
That's awesome. I mean, I think knuckleball pitchers, Tim Wakefield comes to mind, Phil Niekro.
Yeah, this was a good year for knuckleballers. I think you had Charlie Hough, you have Tom Candiotti, and
Yeah.
Phil Niekro. I think we're on the same Indians team in 1987. So it is really a dying art, and you can trace a line back to Hoyt Wilhelm, who was Hall of Famer, played in the 1950s, and I think that you can trace that he was instrumental in actually getting Charlie Hough to throw a knuckleball. And then you have Charlie Hough now as a kind of pitching mentor for some younger guys trying to get that restarted again. I think there's only one knuckleballer left in the major leagues. That's something that makes me a little bit sad, and something that makes Charlie a little bit of a special card here, particularly when you look back at this stat line on the back of this card, and you could see that you have a 39-year-old guy who is has some of his best numbers of his career at 39. It was and was the best pitcher on that Rangers team in 1987.
Well, David, before we go more into the stats, can you just, for listeners at home who may not be as familiar with, the physics of the knuckleball and even just, why it is so difficult to hit and why there's so few of those pitchers, can you tell us a little bit about that?
In short, throwing a knuckleball requires the pitcher to have one manicured fingernails. So you have to have the right kind of fingernails, and you grip the ball with your nails, and then kind of push it toward the plate. And the aim here is to have a little bit of spin, not a lot of spin, and mostly it allows the airflow to use the any kind of scratches on the ball or the stitches on the ball to move the ball through the air and kind of push the ball. There has been some research at the University of Illinois, particularly a physicist named Alan Nathan, and we'll include in the show notes. He has a really great collection of knuckleball research, and he calls it chaotic dynamics determine how the ball moves. So anything, a slight breeze or a stitch that's slightly out of place can cause a ball to shift in the air at the last moment. And that's really the beauty and the ultimately, I think, for some pitchers, the curse of the knuckleball, as we will talk a little bit about with Charlie later.
Well, I've a couple things in response to that. First of all, very proud uh, alumni of the University of Illinois system to have that kind of research being done. I think it's critical in times like these. And second, it's very similar kind of sounding effect to what happens with a curling stone. As you know from my other podcast, This Week in Curling, we've
1988 Topps curling card.
yes, yeah. Sadly, there was no Topps did not have a set there, but the Canadian equivalent, which I think is Toppus, did have a set for that.
The
No,
Canadian equivalent was OPG, actually. Sorry to
Tim
actually you there.
Tim Hortons 1987 card collection. But a curling stone has a similar kind of effect where a slight rotation in the stone is what gives it a predictable path. But if you put no spin on a stone, it will behave very unpredictably. So knuckleballing a 40-pound hunk of granite seems like a very different thing than a 3-ounce ball. But there you go. Okay, well, thank you for that overview. It's very helpful.
And Charlie Hough made a career out of throwing a knuckleball, and there's some really great quotes about why Charlie was a pitcher and why he decided to throw a knuckleball. And he basically said, "I've had a bad arm since before they came out with radar guns, and I don't throw like I do now because I want to. This is the only way I can throw." So he was drafted as an infielder and moved to pitcher because they realized that he couldn't run. So he was he was moved to a spot, and once he learned how to throw this knuckler, he was kind of on his way to the big leagues. He played for a little while with the Dodgers and played for Tommy Lasorda in the minors, and then
by a little while, you mean like 10 seasons?
Yeah.
Like a little while in Charlie Hough time is 10 years.
Yeah, and going back to the card, some of these guys, I love some of these cards where the back of it is so full of stats that you don't even get a fun fact about Charlie.
Yeah, there's no room.
There's no room on this card. And the writing gets so small, I can't imagine what his 1993 baseball card looked like. They probably would have had to have it on 2 cards. But yeah, from the back of this card, you see he played 10 years for the Dodgers. He was a relief pitcher and their closer in the 70s for some really good Dodger teams.
There's no fun fact on the back, but Charlie Hough, this is definitely a special card in my household, in my family, this card is because my wife actually has a signed Charlie Huff baseball. So if we can call this the listener mailbag, Cindy from Chicago says, I have a Charlie Huff signed baseball. And so we asked listener Bill, who's been a longtime supporter of the show and a longtime listener, about, who's my father-in-law, about how he happened to acquire the ball. And so here is what we have in the mailbag from Bill. I think it could be when we lived in Dallas. They had an All-Star game shortly after they built the new stadium. This would be the ballpark at Arlington.
Hmm.
They often time had All-Star game pre-events with a lot of activities. I know we were here when the All-Star game was in the Dallas area at the new stadium in Arlington. I think I got a signed baseball by Fergie Jenkins also the same day.
Fergie Jenkins is an important part of Charlie Huff history.
Oh,
Yeah, I looked back through that to find when that All Star game took place. That would have been the 1995 All Star game was at the ballpark at Arlington shortly after Charlie retires. So he was a spry 47 at that time. Check that baseball and see if it smells like Pall Mall. Um, I don't know what his, if we were going to drop in an advertisement, I'm not sure what his
oh
cigarette of
yeah, sick
choice was.
choice.
Maybe
Yeah, well,
Marlboro.
we'll take a look. I can add that in post if it turns out we'll have the ad
But
department reach out.
yes, in so I guess an interesting, if you look at his stats on this card here, Charlie Huff was a Rangers legend, and I've seen him listed in the top pitchers for the Texas Rangers in their history. And mind you, that includes guys like Ferguson Jenkins, Hall of Famers, Ferguson Jenkins. That includes Nolan Ryan, Kevin Brown. In some lists, I've seen Charlie listed as the number one pitcher in Rangers history. He holds a bunch of records for the Texas Rangers, so it's no surprise that he would be invited back to some kind of Legends event for the All Stars. Charlie only made one All Star game in his 25 season career, and that was in 1986. Arguably, he had better stats in 1987, but at least he got to go to one All Star game. The Ferguson Jenkins connection here, in 1980, Charlie is traded from the Dodgers to the Rangers. His first start only comes as a result of Ferguson Jenkins getting arrested for cocaine possession. And Matt, this is a common thread in our 1988 tops, the cocaine question mark.
Yeah.
So Ferguson Jenkins gets arrested for cocaine possession in 1980 after coke, weed, and hashish were found in his suitcase in Toronto. And this led to Charlie Huff's first start for the Texas Rangers. He would go on to become the all-time Ranger leader in wins, strikeouts, starts, complete games, as well as some less desirable statistics like
Yeah, I see
wild
here.
pitches, hits bat.
He started 40 games and had 13 complete games that season. Like that
Yeah,
is that's incredible.
this is where you have there are some statistics in this season, particularly for pitchers, complete games that we're just probably not going to see anymore. And for context, in 2019, the leader in complete games was a bunch of guys tied with 3 complete games in 2019.
And he had 13.
Charlie had
And
13 on the season. He had 4 in 1 month, in the last month of the season.
God,
You have a this was a big year for him statistically. 40 starts also. I went back. I don't know if people knew it at the time that that was going to be the last time that was going to happen, but that was the last time that anybody had 40 starts in a season. This did lead me down a bit of a rabbit hole of finding
no way. No way.
which I don't, Matt, I don't know if you knew this, but sometimes I like to go off on a bit of a Wikipedia hole or a baseball reference hole. this one led me down a baseball reference hole. I found because I thought, well, 40 starts is a lot by today's standard, but and was even a lot in 1988. Only one other guy in the 1980s had 40 starts in a season, and that guy actually happened to go to high school with my dad. His name is Jim Clancy. He pitched for the
Mm.
Toronto Blue Jays. We will talk about Jim Clancy at some point. He's a St. Rita high school grad. The all-time record for for a season was 75 complete games in 1879. This was Will White of Cincinnati. He went 43 and 31 in 1879. I mostly bring this up because 1879 also includes all of the numbers for 1987. So it's still on, fits within
Okay. Yeah.
the purview of this podcast. So Will White, yeah, it was a real legend. He was maybe the Charlie Huff of his day. His brother was Deacon White, who's a Hall of Famer and maybe more well known, but less well known than Deacon Blues, the Steely Dan song.
Oh yeah. That's one of my favorites.
The so Charlie, and what you just pointed out, the 13 complete games, it does show a decline that we continue to see into 2019. In 1987, there were 561 total complete games. That went up to 622 in 1988. And since 1988, I think every year that number has declined. There were only 45 total complete
Oh
games
wow.
in 2019. So
Yeah,
that
it's
along
quite a
with only
difference.
yeah, that along with only one knuckleball pitcher in the league show why kind of this was it was a different time for pitchers.
You had mentioned that one of the stats in Charlie Huff's career, and in particular in this 87 season, was a bad one or a very negative one. I wondered if we could go back to that. What did you mean?
Yeah, these interestingly on the back of these cards, you don't have a lot of negative stats. I guess runs, earned runs, but that's just the thing that you need to know about the pitcher. You don't have even wild pitches on the back of this. Charlie Huff was the career leader in wild pitches when he retired from the Texas Rangers, and that goes along with throwing a knuckleball. As I described earlier, anything can, from a slight breeze to a slight abrasion on the ball, can disrupt the flow of that ball. So Charlie had threw a lot of wild pitches. He hit a lot of guys. He hit. He actually led the league in 1987 in hit batters. He hit 19 players, and this goes with the territory of being a knuckleball pitcher. It's difficult to control, and it's hell on catchers. I found a good quote from Bob Euchre, famed catcher and TV sitcom dad.
Yeah, Bob Euchre, big fan of the show.
Yeah, Bob Euchre, 86 years old. The knuckleball is famously difficult for catchers. Bob Euchre said, the best way to catch a knuckleball, wait until it stops rolling and pick it up. That brings us to an unprecedented moment in 1988 Topps podcasting history, Matt. I'm going to introduce a second character, a second
Whoa,
card.
wait a minute. I
Sorry,
think
I didn't run this past management.
the klaxon is going off in the background here. A second card,
Yeah, I don't,
unprecedented.
I didn't ask the manager. I didn't run this past ownership, but we're going to also talk about Geno
Can we
Petralli.
afford to do this? I don't. I mean, I don't know if this is even possible.
It's difficult times, Matt, but we're going to have to get through 792 of these. If we talk about all of them individually, I don't know how we're going to do it. So some of these are going to have to be dual
All
card
right. Okay. Okay.
casts.
Well,
There,
all right. I'm
I can
sure that
sense that it's going to be popular.
I can tell. I can tell the listeners are going to love this, David. So let's go for it.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, listener. Geno Petralli. This card
What number
What's
card
what's
is this? So
he
just so
is
the
589, number
listeners can
589.
check this off of the checklist.
We're gonna front of the card. You got Texas Ranger in that kind of light blue uniform. That's a heck of a mustache. Good swing. Geno from the back of this card is a catcher from Sacramento, California. Looks like he hadn't done much before 1987, but in that year played in 101 games and hit 302, so a pretty decent average, but didn't have a lot of at bats, so looks like he was a pinch hitter a lot of the time.
Okay, I'm pulling up the card right here. The first search in Google takes me to an autographed card, but
But
now
there
pulling
is
up,
a
yeah.
reason, Matt, why Geno is, I guess, infamous. This is an
Mm.
unfortunate stat. So Geno Petralli was Charlie Huff's catcher during Charlie's time at the Texas Rangers. That also led Geno Petralli to lead the league in passed balls 3 seasons in a row. 87, 88, and 89, he led the American League in passed balls. As Bob Euchre said, very difficult to catch a knuckleball. And what I found from some of the videos that we're definitely going to have in the show notes here, when you watch some of these knuckleballs, it seems like the same thing that makes the knuckleball difficult to hit makes it really difficult to catch. So you have Charlie Hough having his best season of his long career, striking out 223 guys. Also, the reason why it was difficult for Geno to catch the ball in 1987. So he had 35 pass balls in 1987, and that is a modern record. He also had a single game against the Detroit Tigers where he had 6 passed balls in the game, which is a modern record as well. There was another game where he had 4 in a single inning, which has been tied in more recent years by another knuckleball pitcher and catcher combination.
Okay, David, you had mentioned that 6 passed balls in a game. Remind us the difference between a passed ball and a wild pitch.
Yeah, the passed ball is in the official scorer's judgment the catcher's fault that he could not hold on to a pitch versus the pitcher's fault that the ball went past the catcher and allowed a runner to move up on the base paths.
Okay. I've sometimes seen this as if the ball hits the often that if the ball hits the ground before reaching the catcher's mitt, it's more likely to be counted as a wild pitch because at that point it could bounce and go anywhere. But
Yeah.
many times with a knuckleball, the ball just moves a few inches at the last second and the catcher just whiffs and it just goes right by them.
Yes, and you will see that, Matt, in this 6 passed ball game. The the ball just seems to either drop or move to the left or as soon as it gets to the catcher. And and most of these, I think that they were strikeouts that Geno just could not handle. So he had so not only did he have 6 passed balls in this game versus the Tigers, it led to 7 runs. There were no and the Tigers won 7-0. So
Mm,
it was a rough game, and it was a rough
that's
game, but also a not necessarily a badly pitched game. And
mhm,
Petralli after the game said, Charlie Huff threw the ball great today. We'd still be out there playing if I'd caught the ball, you know,
mm.
presuming it would be 0-0. He just said, I let in all of their runs. So
Oh,
he clearly took it. But this is August of 1987. He he was still the catcher for Charlie Huff 2 years later. So clearly it wasn't that he was a bad catcher, or it was just a really difficult task to catch this guy.
yeah. He
And
just said Charlie had extra good stuff that day.
yes, and if you look at it later on, there are Hall of Fame catchers that just would sit out games that are pitched by knuckleballers, including when Charlie Huff comes to the Chicago White Sox. Carlton Fisk never, from my research, caught a game that Charlie pitched. In in looking into it a little bit further, Carlton Fisk said that the only time that he caught Charlie was in warm-ups. They would bring in a different catcher who more specialized in catching knuckleballers, and that is a thing that I think some guys have made a career out of, where they just move with the knuckleballer to the next team when that guy gets traded. or they get
Okay.
brought in to catch a knuckleballer. In in at least a little bit of positive on that. So it was a rough year defensively for Geno, but he had his best offensive season in 1987. So that maybe made up for it a little bit. So you
Yeah, it
have a
looks
guy
like he batted 302, so played in 101 games and 31 RBIs and a 302 average. So for a catcher, that's yeah,
not too
302
bad,
average
especially
is
for
fantastic.
and he only actually played catcher in 60 games.
Mm.
So the rest of them were pinch hits, and that's I don't
Okay.
want I didn't want this to all be negative about balls getting past Geno. He was a pretty good pinch hitter, and I saw at least one conversation between Rangers announcers where one guy presented that Geno Petralli was the best pinch hitter that the Rangers ever had, and that was on the basis of a game where he came in on the first pitch as a pinch hitter, hit a game-tying home run off of Roger Clemens in 1986, and just had some pretty good clutch pinch hits, as well as being the catcher for the guy that it seems nobody else wanted to catch for.
Hmm.
He, along with catching for the legendary Charlie Hough, he was also later the catcher for Nolan Ryan when Nolan Ryan threw his 300th, got his 300th win.
All right, I really like Geno Petralli now. This is a good season and a good card, and the mustache certainly sets it off as well. So for a double card issue, this is great. The only thing I feel like, David, we could add to this show to to take it up to 11 after having two cards, six pass balls in a single game would be to add breaking music news to it. So what is the Geno Petralli connection to current American rock and roll music?
Matt, I'm so glad that you asked. When I was looking for information about Geno Petralli, as you do, just in your day to day, just looking for the latest Geno Petralli news. Geno is currently a coach in the minor league system. He has one son who played minor league baseball, and he has another son who is the singer in a band called White Denim.
Aha, yes.
Matt, when I looked for White Denim on Facebook, I had two
Hmm.
friends who liked White Denim, the band,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that was
I.
you and your wife.
Yep. That's correct. That's correct. We've been listening to them for. I don't remember when we first saw them. I believe it could have been at the Austin City Limits festival back. I would say probably in the 2007, 8, 9 timeframe. And I think there was some other show that they had opened for Spoon, like on the summer festival circuit, and or other shows for them. So yeah, I've been followed them for quite some time.
Well, that I had not heard White Denim, and Matt, you and I both listen to a lot of music, and I don't know how I missed them, but I through this listened to a bunch of White Denim songs. We I think both have a few of our favorites that maybe we'll link to in the show notes and
Hmm.
add a couple clips. I reached
Yeah.
out to White Denim the other day, and they gave us permission to use a couple clips, so I really appreciate that. In breaking and timely news, there is a brand new White Denim record that was written and recorded in a 30-day period between March 18th, 2020 and April 17th, 2020. So I just went online today and pre-ordered a vinyl copy of that.
Yes, that new record, World as a Waiting Room by White Denim, is available for purchase now at whitedenimmusic.com.
Matt, how does this, aside from the Geno Petralli connection, there is another connection to 1987 and 1988 tops, and that is there is a White Denim song called Incavilia, named after the great Pete Incaviglia, Texas Rangers legend, and subject of an upcoming episode. Also,
Fantastic.
James Petralli plays in or has a solo act called Bop English, and there is a Guardian article that we'll link to that he is wearing a really great English national team satin, what looks like a starter jacket, and it really, you
Oh,
could replace the Three Lions crest with a Texas Rangers crest, and it would be a perfect 1987 jacket. But I did
no.
really enjoy Bob English. It reminded me a little bit of T-Rex, and so I was then listening to T-Rex a lot this week. So it was a good week for me, music wise.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great connection. So we've got a triple. We basically have a triple show, with two cards and a new release in the music world. So
Knuckleballs, Geno Petralli, new music. What more could
mustaches.
we ask for?
Sounds great. Thank you again to White Denim. Thank you to all of the listeners. You can reach us at 1988 Tops Podcast at gmail.com. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.